That's the call. Come. I say come. Let we, that's more than one, build a nation together. Our home, our place of abode, let's make it better. Let's transform it. Let's improve it, because our children and children will feel proud of all of us, the contribution that we made. So today, tonight, tomorrow, and then going forward, let us produce to transform this place. Let us stop playing politics with everything. When it comes to Grenada, there should be no politics. When it comes to Grenada being transformed, being developed, you should jump on board to ensure that it happens. I want to welcome you to the hub. Again, we have a unique moment in time to reason, to chit-chat, to talk about Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. My name is Kem Jones. And tonight, I want to start off with the presentation by the Most Honorable Deacon Mitchell re the cannabis legislation, or the legislation speaking to cannabis, locally known as marijuana. So I want to play his contribution because he gave a good insight as to what the government was thinking and what the government envisions Grenada to look like with such an industry and such a transformative agenda. Because this piece of legislation is one that should have been enacted 20 years ago, or maybe even 30 years ago. But back then, our politicians were thinking colonial, and they were patterning after certain countries, and those countries opened up, legislate, and created a thriving cannabis industry. And we are now playing catch up, right? We trying to fall in line. So I want to big up the Most Honorable Deacon Mitchell and his government for not being afraid to take on something as this. It was strange that the NNP made a U-turn, because the leader a couple years ago said not under his watch. Not under his watch, and something about dead body. Not over his dead body or something like that. They would decriminalize cannabis. Coming close to the last election, they tried to go into parliament and made a grand move with the hope of catching the young people, but it did not succeed. But today, because they want to be seen as falling in line, because they're all for votes. What they want is votes. The NNP, they want votes. But the people are not falling for it because the NNP been in power for 23 years and a half, and they never made any serious move to decriminalize cannabis and open the industry up so that we can benefit economically. So I'm really, really happy that they did that. That's the NDC administration. I'm not too concerned about the NNP because I know they're politicking. So let me play for you what the most honorable Deacon Mitchell had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and pleasant morning to pleasant morning to you, Mr. Speaker, and to members of the House, persons in the gallery. I take the opportunity, since it's my first time here for 2026, to wish everyone a healthy and successful 2026. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the passage of the bill through all stages in the House of Representatives for all of the reasons advanced by the leader of government business, if I may call him that, the minister with responsibility for cannabis, the member of parliament for St. Andrew Southwest. And I think, Mr. Speaker, I said to him, his presentation was well-researched, erudite, eloquent, passionate, persuasive, and demonstrates why, Mr. Speaker, that both himself and his team, the enormous work they've done on getting us here today. And so I join with commending the Cannabis Secretariat and the Cannabis Commission for the enormous work they've done in getting us to what I will call the first stage of establishing and creating a cannabis industry in Grenada, Carrickman, and PT Martinique. And therefore, there still is a lot of work to be done, but we have to start somewhere. And Mr. Speaker, I hope, as the member for the town of St. George has said, that we have universal bipartisan support for this bill, because this is, while we brought the bill, Mr. Speaker, I think that there has to be a clear recognition that the trend to reverse decades of misinformation, deliberately so, stigmatization, criminalization of the marijuana plant, first and foremost, because it's just a plant, just like any other plant. And then the use or misuse of the plant, and the demons and non-demons that have been deliberately associated with it started quite some time ago. And the minister has already, and others have already singled out, in the context of the Caribbean, the Rastafarian community, for their unyielding, unwavering commitment to reversing this heresy. And it is a historic moment to be here this morning, and I'm proud to be part of a team that has gotten us to this first stage. And Mr. Speaker, sometimes we think there's never a plan, or that we are whooping, or that things are happening ad hoc. I want to emphasize that there's a plan, because the National Sustainable Development Plan, I always go back to it, the NSDP 2020 to 2035, has 12 references in it to marijuana. And it starts by indicating that what should happen is that a marijuana advisory committee should be formed or established to advise the state of Grenada on the path that should be taken to implement the recommendations of CARICOM's Marijuana Commission that was done in 2018. The Cannabis Secretariat that we formed and the Cannabis Committee that we formed, therefore, is a direct result of this. That's the first point I wish to make. Second, Mr. Speaker, we on this side, in 2022, in our manifesto to the public, made it clear that we would pursue the decriminalization of marijuana. We said, and I'm going to quote from that manifesto, driven by creativity and innovation, an NDC-led government will, bullet point 1, legalize cannabis and create a legal and regulatory framework for its production and sale. So this today, Mr. Speaker, is the commencement of a promise made and a promise kept. This was in 2022. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, there was, in fact, as the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George said, a draft bill entitled the exact same thing as this bill, a Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Amendment Bill 2021, then prepared by Attorney General Dia Forrester. That bill was circulated, Mr. Speaker, and for reasons that certainly I have not yet heard explained, it was not proceeded with. And I recall emphasizing in 2022, because I only got involved in public life in late 2021, that in fact the bill should be proceeded with. Because the criminalization of the use of marijuana as a policy, as a public policy, had clearly failed. And the evidence was overwhelming that it had failed. Mr. Speaker, there's a very tragic incident involving a young man whom I know personally because he taught my son how to swim from St. George, Northwest, who was shot by the police and who effectively lost the use of his arm. And the stress arising from that incident escalated and led to the tragedy where his father attacked on the street in St. George some police officers. He eventually shot and killed him. And what did this stem from? The suspicion of either marijuana use or possession. So, Mr. Speaker, all around us, there are real tragedies. A national swimmer, a national coach who's teaching our children to swim. And simply because of the suspicion of either having in his possession a spliff, and I'm saying suspicion here because I don't know that it was ever confirmed, he was shot, lost the use of his arm. His father was so broken that his father erupted into violence. Police officers were injured, and the father himself lost his life over a public policy that had failed and was proven to be a failure. So this is not about whether persons have the right to take part in the case of religious purposes in a sacrament, or in the case of medicinal or therapeutical uses, medicine to heal or to abate pain, or whether for commercial or industrial purposes to be able to make products that have utility, or whether it is for personal entertainment or recreational use. The question is whether the public policy of criminalizing it works. And decades of it has shown that it has failed. So we either continue with bad policy, continue with the tragedies that I've just described, continue with the tragedies that my sister, the Member of Parliament for St. John, described, or we recognize that we must pivot and adopt a public policy that is more pragmatic, that addresses the social injustice that has been perpetrated on particular segments of our society for decades, and that we also recognize that there are opportunities for the commercial and industrial, medicinal and therapeutic exploitation of a basic plant that grows wild. They call it weed for a reason. It grows very quickly. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, there's always the bright side and the dark side. We did not have an approach that said this is purely about recreational or purely about the social injustices that have been perpetrated on the Rastafarian community. We also recognize that there are serious medical risk and that there are serious societal challenges that exist, whether or not the policy of continuing to criminalize the use of possession or having apparatus preparatory to the use or possession or cultivation of marijuana, that these things exist. That is why the chief medical officer was a member of the committee. That is why the member of parliament for St. Andrew Northwest, as the Minister for Mental Health and Well-being, would have argued passionately for saying, contrary to what I wished to pursue, that the age for permitting the use should be 21 and not 18. There was passionate debate. We went back and forth. I tend to sometimes be black and white. If you're an adult, you're an adult. 18 is 18. We recognize 18. You can drive, you can vote, you can get married. So from my perspective, at 18, you should be permitted if you so choose. But I was in the minority. And so I see graciously to the medical experts, to the mental health advocates, who recognize that at 18, a brain is perhaps still developing. And so I say this to say, Mr. Speaker, because oftentimes we come in Parliament and I hear that there's been no consultation, and no consultation, and no consultation. Well, the consultation started first with CARICOM's own consultation, of which Brianna was part. It is reflected in our National Sustainable Development Plan. And there's an introductory address in that National Sustainable Development Plan by the former Prime Minister, former opposition leader, and member of Parliament for St. George Northwest. So I hope he wouldn't say he doesn't know what's in his own plan. We advocated for it. The member of the town of St. George has said and gone on record that he advocated for it. The Cannabis Secretariat and Committee has had extensive consultations, town halls. The Rastafarian community itself has sought and obtained permission from the Commissioner of Police and the Minister of National Security to display the plant in public educational sessions. So if there is one bill that there has been widespread and extensive and prolonged, stretching over a decade, discussion, debate, and consultation on, is the question of the changing policy towards marijuana possession, cultivation, use for medicinal, therapeutic, recreational, religious, and sacramental purposes. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize that I've already given instructions, even though the bill has not yet gone through all of its stages, that we need to make the National Rehabilitation Offenders Board aware that the Act, this Act, explicitly amends the National Rehabilitation Offenders Board, and that the board is aware, given the statistics presented to us by the Minister with responsibility for marijuana, that at least 649 persons over the last 5 years have marijuana convictions. And I'm assuming a certain percentage of that is, in fact, for minor offenses and likely for persons who would have had in their possession, in the case of marijuana itself, 56 grams or less, in the case of the raisin, 15 grams or less, or who might have had some apparatus, whether it's a smoke pipe or something preparatory to cultivation or use, that they will be applying, once the bill is enacted, to have their records made clean. And therefore, we need to ensure that the board is properly aware and ready to treat with the applications that will come its way. I wish to emphasize that the Cannabis Secretariat is set up so that all and sundry, including members of Parliament, can have access to them, can make recommendations, and make suggestions as we go forward, particularly with phase 2, which is to actually craft the policy and the legislation that will create the framework for the marijuana industry. I hear the member for the town of St. George saying he wished he could be consulted with and he may have suggestions. Well, that is why the Cannabis Secretariat is set up. It is a public body. You can go to them. We cannot always come and bring things to you. We are accountable to the people, not you. You are accountable to the people too. Go to the Cannabis Secretariat, make your recommendations, make your suggestions. email them, call them, and give your input as to how we can craft the second phase, which is the actual creation of the industry, the licensing regime, the regulatory regime. And I too would openly confess that I too have a bias for saying that the Rastafarian community should be given preponderance of priority when it comes to the creation of the cannabis industry. Because merely expunging the record for minor possession of the plant or the resin or apparatus is not a sufficient atonement for the historical wrong that has been done to the Rastafarian community. So, Mr. Speaker, I do not wish to carry on much further. But it's important, I think, for the public to appreciate. And the Minister for Mental Health, Wellness, and the MP for St. Andrew Northwest, as well as the MP for St. John, and the Leader of Government Business, the MP for St. George Southeast, I think has been at pains to point out that we are not discounting, nor are we ignoring the risks associated particularly with recreational use of marijuana, and in particular on our young people. I do not smoke. I'm not endorsing the recreational use of marijuana. But my personal beliefs or my personal behavior is not the basis for public policy making. Public policy making has to be based on data, what's in the best interest of the public, and how should the state allocate ever scarcer resources into areas of public impact. Spending large quantities of the state's resources, whether it's in the form of manpower, police officers, vehicles chasing other vehicles up and down the place, airport and seaport surveillance, simply to collect, arrest, prosecute, jail, fine, and then destroy large quantities of a plant is not an appropriate use of the state resources. So when the member for the Tongue of St. George says, where will someone get the 56 grams? Our policy is comprehensive. That is why we are allowing you to grow up to 4 plants yourself. He was once the Minister of Agriculture. I believe, does that mean I have no time or I have 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker?
Means that your allotted 15 minutes has expired, so you may request additional time.
I did promise I wasn't going to go on for longer, so may I request 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker?
And
thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm making the point that the policy and the legislation is not enacted in silos. We recognize that if one wishes to have small quantities of marijuana for recreational use, they have to get it somewhere. Hence the reason why we've said you can grow your own. And I was making the point that the former Minister for Agriculture and member for the Tongue of St. George would appreciate that you don't need, since he's been around many persons who I'm sure have been arrested and charged for marijuana, large amounts of soil to grow marijuana. You don't need to grow it outside anymore. They are grown in-house, greenhouses, etc., etc. So the policy thinking here, Mr. Speaker, is that if persons can grow their own, they don't need to buy it from anyone. So if you are in excess of the prescribed amount, it means you are trying to sell or trade. You are trying to take part in an industry that we will seek to create and regulate and license, but until that time, grow for your own consumption and use only. And if someone, the Rastafarian would be best placed to say whether 4 plants, how much grams it gives you. I suspect it is more than 56 grams. But if you are seeking to bring for a friend or a relative, you know the limit is 56 grams. So you should have no more than the 56 grams on you. We have similarly decriminalized or seek to decriminalize the apparatus associated with the use of it, whether it's the pipe, etc., etc. we have sought to put in the legislation your right to import for medicinal therapeutic uses in circumstances where you are prescribed and permitted to do so. So we recognize, Mr. Speaker, that beyond the recreational use, beyond the sacramental use by the Rastafarian community, that we also have to permit persons who are genuinely using it for medicinal and therapeutic purposes, whether it's in the form of oils, whether it's in the form of medication, the opportunity to be able to bring in for their use in circumstances as prescribed by the legislation. We have made it clear, and I want to emphasize this, we are not condoning, supporting, and hence we have criminalized the public smoking of marijuana. You have your home, you have the homes of your friends. If you have to engage in the recreational use within the limits prescribed, do it in private. So when the minister and the MP for St. Andrew Southwest point out that the police will have work to do still, there is still work to do. We've made it clear that we do not want, in addition to no public smoking or use, we do not want it around our educational facilities. And we do not want any unscrupulous persons targeting our young men and women. And I'm sure that the Cannabis Secretariat will spend significant time educating and emphasizing our young men and women about making healthy choices in relation to the use of marijuana. And it is important to point this out. Oftentimes when things are criminalized and driven underground and the black market is created, the quality, the circumstances, and the health implications become worse for the users. And so one of the advantages of seeking to decriminalize small quantities of marijuana and giving you the ability to grow it yourself is that you have greater control over what, if you so choose, what you choose to consume. In circumstances where it's coming from the black market, oftentimes it's laced with other products that are often quite dangerous and leads to even more dramatic and consequential negative health impacts on our users. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that there are some in our community who will still be uneasy about this policy shift. But we must be driven by actual data. We can go to Antigua, we can go to St. Kitts and Nevis, we can go to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, other countries which have already begun the policy shift, and we can assess whether the societies are falling apart or not. They are not. And so the data is there to show that this policy shift, when done in a measured, responsible, empathetic, and data-driven manner, is a policy shift whose time has come. And I view this, Mr. Speaker, as the courage to finally begin to tackle an issue that has dogged us for decades, which I think we all knew instinctively, and I would even say morally, was a wrong public policy, but which we simply did not have the courage to do. So the decriminalization of marijuana is an idea whose time has come, and I am indeed happy to commend the bill to members of this House and to the public, and for the public to continue to engage in the discussion and the debate about this matter as we seek to pass the bill and then move to implementation into law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to colleague members.
Right. So that was the most honorable Deacon Mitchell speaking there on the bill, right? This bill that was debated today, it focuses on cannabis, and he did a nice presentation there. I will now go over to the Honorable Lennox Andrews, because he's the minister responsible for that. So let me feature him.
Thank you very much, Honorable MP. I saw the light of the MP for St. Andrews Southwest. The first, I now invite you, Honorable MP, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of this noble bill, of this meaningful bill. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we are here today because of the actions taken by our government to put in place a committee that will guide the decriminalization and then the development of the cannabis industry here in Grenada.
All right, so that's the Honorable Lennox Andrews there. All right. So he is presenting, and for those on the radio, they're just setting up
And
something.
so, Mr. Speaker, it hasn't been an easy task for the committee and for us as a government. It required sober thinking, research, visits to places that have gone before us, and a clear understanding of the approach that we should take in bringing us here today. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by saying this, that marijuana has a soul. And by this I mean that many people, and in particular the Rastafari movement, have given their lives for this plant. Many fathers would have left their homes never to return, and with no information on their whereabouts. Many children would have had to grow up in the absence of their fathers and not knowing who their fathers are. Mr. Speaker, there is a saying that a man must be prepared to give his life for a cause that is just and dignified. A man must be prepared to give his life for a cause that is just and dignified. For in so doing, he will never die, but live forever. And so the souls of the many Rastafari men and women who gave their lives for this noble but meaningful cause was not in vain. For our presence here this morning, discussing the bill for the decriminalization of marijuana is a direct result of sacrificing their souls over many years.
All right, Honorable MP, before you proceed, let me just make this announcement that we do not allow applause from the gallery. Please, so refrain from applauding. It doesn't matter how you feel about what is said here in the chamber, refrain. The practice is the applauding comes from the flow, right? I understand the urge to the feeling, but the practice in the parliament is that it's not allowed in the gallery. Please proceed, Honorable MP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker. With all these Rasta men here present, I'm very happy for their presence. And I say to you, Rasta man, live up. Rasta man, live up. Don't give up. Today, Mr. Speaker, the cannabis industry is big. It is very big. Marijuana is being studied by some of the finest minds this planet has produced. I met a young Dominican, a young guy from Dominica, when I visited St. Vincent some years ago, or in fact last year, because every year St. Vincent has a seminar, a symposium on marijuana. And a team from our commission, including our chairman, the finest legal mind, Mr. Claude, was also present, together with a few Rasta men. And that young man from Dominica has an institute based in Jamaica with a team of young, bright Caribbean people. And they are doing research on the marijuana, the strain, the quality, and so on. So some of the finest minds, Mr. Speaker, are involved. Millions of dollars are spent every year in research on the medicinal benefits of this plant, while simultaneously millions are invested and millions of profit are earned from the same medicinal products of marijuana. Newsletters are produced every day on the development taking place in this industry. And of course, there is no reason why we in Grenada should not subscribe to them and read them and familiarize ourselves with this very important topic. Many young people are taking up employment in this industry, so that today, marijuana has its own lawyers. Peter, I think you are a marijuana lawyer. Today, marijuana has its own pharmacists, they have its own doctors, they have its own engineers. So while we in Grenada, we're persecuting and we're jailing our young men and women for this plant, others are happily making a mint out of it. So we must stop that. We must stop this persecution. It's not good for us. And Mr. Speaker, I want to just give you some figures about the great United States, which everybody referred to. The 2025 Vance finding, and Vance is the leading staffing agency for the cannabis industry in the US, revealed that the US cannabis industry currently supports, employs 425,002 full-time jobs. 425,000 people working in marijuana. And that in the same year, the national cannabis retail sales amounted to $30.1 billion. It's a $1 billion industry, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we have to get involved in it. And the long-term outlook for cannabis remains incredibly strong. And so today, Mr. Speaker, today represents a special moment in Grenada's political and economic history. Today marks a transformative milestone in our nation's journey towards a more just, evidence-based, and responsible approach to cannabis. For decades, our approach to cannabis was characterized by rigid prohibition, a system that was prone to causing lasting social damage and disproportionate harm to our young people in particular. And today, we move away from that era of prohibition, guided by the exhaustive consultations with the Cannabis Working Committee, our Ministry of Legal Affairs, and our fellow citizens. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize members of the Cannabis Committee here, if you don't mind. They don't have to applaud. But if I could ask them to take a bow, that would be fine. So the chair, please stand and take a bow. Ms. Lazarus, the PRO, please stand and take a bow. Ms. Antoine, another PRO, please stand and take a bow. Chief Medical Officer, the big brain, Dr. Son Charles, just like me, Cuban trained, well educated, please stand and take a bow. Officer Cohen, and Officer Cohen tell them that with this law, you have more work to do, eh? Some people say, with this law, with this bill, the police will not work. Tell them you have more work to do. our assistant permanent secretary with responsibility for marijuana, for cannabis, yes, Natalie Williams, and the driving force behind all of this, the executive secretary, executive director of the Cannabis Commission, Sister Nandi Noel. Nandi, don't be afraid to stand. The truth be told, Mr. Speaker, is that these are the people. But look, I missed out the main man. We have in our midst, as part of the committee, a Rastafari. Rastafari from Chantimel, Selassie I, Jah! Ever living, ever faithful, ever sure. And they use their brain cells painstakingly, so Mr. Speaker. They spend hours thinking, reading, analyzing, and coming up with this bill that we have today, in consultation with a lot of people. We got calls from principals, from churches, from individuals, from all over the place, guiding the process and providing the input, the recommendation for us to bring us here today. So this has been a marvelous job, and I want to commend profoundly the Commission for its work in that regard. So, Mr. Speaker, today our government is evolving beyond the old ways of thinking. We are replacing a broken system of criminalization with a modern, well-regulated framework, one that prioritizes the health of individuals and the safety of our youth. Oops. While finally unlocking the therapeutic and economic power for all Grenadians. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, this bill we are presenting to this country today for our people is grounded in three main pillars. The first pillar is that of justice, social justice. It's a bill to rectify the past. We are providing amnesty and the expungement of records for cannabis offenses that fall within the specification of the bill. We believe that a past mistake should not be a permanent barrier to an individual's progress. Furthermore, we are upholding the constitutional rights of our Rastafarian community, recognizing the right to use cannabis as a sacred sacrament within the places of worship. As a Catholic, Mr. Chair, I use incense. We in the Catholic Church, we use incense. So the Rasta man has a right to use his ganja. Nothing is wrong with that. The second pillar, Mr. Speaker, is personal safety, personal rights, and public safety. And I want to make this point, Mr. Speaker, loud and clear, and I'm going to repeat it. This is a measured shift, not an introduction to an unrestricted market. It is a measured shift and not an introduction to an unrestricted market. We are decriminalizing marijuana to individuals aged 21 and above. We are also decriminalizing the possession of up to 56 grams of cannabis and 15 grams of cannabis resin for private use. We are also permitting registered household cultivation of 4 plants. And this is to ensure that adults can address their personal health needs in privacy without fear of arrest. Notwithstanding this, Mr. Speaker, we remain very vigilant. We have established a fixed penalty fine system for the public use of cannabis and created a rehabilitative framework for our youth. And I will speak more about that just now. And to those who intend to exploit our children, Be warned. Be warned. The penalties for supplying minors with cannabis remain severe. And so we choose counseling over criminalization for our youth. But we also choose strict enforcement for the protectors. And Mr. The third pillar has to do with the creation of a Grenadian-first marijuana industry. We haven't reached it yet, but we're getting there. So looking ahead, our good intention is to build a national asset. And the Cannabis Commission, and through its work, we are going to design a legal industry, medicinal agro-processing and research that prioritizes local benefits in the Grenadian first industry. And I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, that industry we want to create is part of our government's effort to expand and to increase and to widen the economic base of our country so that more employment opportunities can be provided for our citizens. And therefore, the marijuana industry will serve as a complement to the traditional economic sectors like agriculture, tourism, construction. And that's the vision of this government. We first started with the creative economy as a new area of economic activity. Then we have the blue economy, another new area of economic activity. And so we are widening the economic base. And when we develop our marijuana industry, we're going to have another new area of economic activity that will increase our employment, our income, and our output, and make our country richer, and make every Ghanaian richer, so that there will be no more poverty in this country. There will be no poverty in this country. There will be no poverty in this country. Amen. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to spend a little bit more time on the real situation facing our young people relative to cannabis and how this bill seeks to give attention and to protect our young people, in particular our young men. And we know what's happening to our young men these days. We're not giving them enough attention. They need the attention. So, Mr. Speaker, I have collected data on the number of marijuana arrests in Grenada for the period 2021 to 2025. And I will tell you, in 2021, there were 243 cases. In 2022, 115, because you know all that, because you defended them. In 2023, there were 95. In 2024, there was 125. In 2025, we had 71. So put differently, over the last 5 years, there has been 649 arrests for marijuana in this country. And this figure, Mr. Speaker, underscores the objective necessity of the current bill in rectifying the social injustices of our past approach to marijuana in this country. But I want to go further, Mr. Speaker. Of that 649 cases, 11%, or 72, involved individuals caught with less than 56 grams. Mr. Speaker, could I ask for another 15 minutes, please?
Honorable MP, the allotted time to members is 15 minutes according to the standing orders. I now allow you to go on for another 5 minutes.
%, it's the same 56 grams we're talking about that we're trying to decriminalize. 72 cases. 46% of 300 cases were classified as simple possession. But here this, Mr. Speaker, 14%, which is 90 cases, involved children and young people. Involved children and young people. Under this new bill, these children going to jail. They would not be defended by Peter under this new bill. Under this new bill, these young people will be directed to counseling and rehabilitation rather than entering the justice system. Good? And Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to the kind of counseling that is expected, the kind of education that is expected. Apart from the fact that they will be taught about the negative impact of smoking at an early age, right? They will also be taught, Mr. Speaker, about the many professions associated with marijuana. And I want to refer to some of them. Cultivation and growing. You could be a grower, a harvest technician, you could be a director of cultivation, you could be a breeder or a nursery assistant, because it's an industry. Processing and manufacturing. You could be an extraction technician, an edible chef. You could be a packaging specialist or an infusion technician. Retail and dispensary. You can be a bud tender, a dispensary manager, a dispensary buyer. Laboratory and quality assurance. You can be a lab technician, a scientist, a quality control specialist. Distribution, logistics, and corporate. You can be a delivery driver, a marketing brand manager, a cannabis consultant. You could be an accountant. And there are some emerging and specialized roles. You could be a cannabis store operator. Yes, cannabis store operator. A data analyst, equipment technician. So there are many wonderful professions associated with marijuana. So while some of these jobs may require entry-level training, the majority of them require specialized training and knowledge in horticulture, in biochemistry, and of course, in legal compliance. So, Mr. Speaker, we are well taking care of our young people in this bill. And so, Mr. Speaker, given my 5 minutes, let me rush to close. And I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, in closing. This bill represents a paradigm shift, a change in the status quo, a break with the past, a new construct, which when passed in Parliament will become the new conventional wisdom regarding our attitudes and our approach and of our image towards marijuana in this country. And therefore I call on all of us Grenadians to become familiar with this bill, discuss it among yourselves, for it will be the basis for the identification and development of a new area of economic activity that will increase our income, employment, and output, our gross domestic product. So the foundational work has been done. I once again thank the members of the Cannabis Committee for your good work. And the time is now for us all to work together to build a country that is just and that is fair, and to make Grenada a better place for all of us to live. Thank you.
Right, so that was the Honorable Lennox Andrews. I mean, he really put on a good debate, a good presentation, and I want to applaud him, big up your whole self, the Honorable Lennox Andrews. So here we come to the end of tonight's program. I wanted to play that little promo piece for the Canada chapter of the NDC. Well, I'll do that tomorrow morning because the event, the karaoke and oil and so on, that is on the 24th, 4 days from today. Tuesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that's when they're having the event in Canada. Folks, have a pleasant night. I will be back with